I'm angry about all of the human rights abuses. I'm angry about all of the excessive use of force. I'm angry about, what happened on October 7th in Israel and what happened in Gaza. I'm angry about what Russia's doing in Ukraine. I'm angry about Sudan. I'm angry about the Eastern Congo. All I'm asking for is that people have a historical context, both for what has happened to the Palestinians and what has happened to the Israelis, because we are not going to implement the 20-point peace plan or any other peace plan unless people come with some sense of historical perspective and empathy about how we're going to move people. There had to be some trust between rulers and citizens, trust among citizens, and there's been, in my view, a full-throated attack on trust. And it's come from a number of different sources, some of it from authoritarian leaders who don't want you to trust anyone but them. They want, if you go back and look at the history of dictatorships, read about them, study them, one of their primary targets is trust.
I want to talk about you now. You've been in the news this past week for some comments you made at an event in New York organized by the newspaper Israel Hayom. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but you said that smart, well-educated young Americans are getting their news from social media and from TikTok. And you went on to say that this is how they're learning about what happened on October 7th and then what happened in Gaza in the months that followed. And it appears that this was a broader lament on your part about declining support among Americans for Israel. That comment has generated a lot of controversy, and it's led Congressman Ro Khanna, for example, to point out that I don't think the answer is to disparage the intelligence of young people. It's been a few days now since you've said that. How are you reflecting on your words and the controversy around it?
Well, I think it is a provable fact that most Americans and an even bigger percentage of young Americans get their news from social media. If that is controversial, then people are not paying attention to how...
Is that a bad thing?
I don't know if it's a bad thing, but I think it's an incomplete...
Well, let me rephrase this.
They should be listening to you, Ravi. I mean, obviously.
People do listen to me for what it's worth, and I am also on Instagram and TikTok. But I guess the broader point here is that if Americans are shifting in their views about Israel, and poll after poll shows that that is the case, that is based on some information that they're getting not just from social media, but also from very reputable journalists operating in the region, also Palestinian journalists in Gaza. Why is that not accurate?
I'm not saying it's not accurate. I am saying that I teach at Columbia University, and I teach a course called Inside the Situation Room. And so it's a very large course. I co-teach it with the dean of the School of International and Public Affairs. And so I've had many, many conversations with very smart young people, not just Americans, but literally from around the world.
It's worth pointing out that Columbia, of course, has been a center of some protest and action.
And it was.
On this issue.
And I talked to students there. I've talked to students elsewhere. And in talking with them about their views, they were certainly entitled to those views based on whatever information they had. But they did not always know why they were saying what they said. And all I'm asking for is that people have a historical context, both for what has happened to the Palestinians and what has happened to the Israelis, because we are not going to implement the 20-point peace plan or any other peace plan unless people come with some sense of historical perspective and empathy about how we're going to move people toward what I still believe is the only realistic outcome, a two-state solution. And we're not going to get there if people, when they say from the river to the sea, and you say what river and what sea, and they don't know, which has personally happened in conversations that I've had. I just, but this is a larger issue, because even on other matters in this class that I teach, we are not doing a good job teaching history. we're not giving young people the kind of context that I think they need to be decision makers.
But with all due respect, and I can't gauge how well young people grapple with history, but what I can speak to is they're grappling with the here and now. And they are witnessing images that are live streamed, that are coming out every day. You know, and yes, there is misinformation and disinformation, but a lot of it is real. And I think there's a genuine anger in the United States and around the world that some of that anger is deflected.
But Ravi, I'm angry about all of the human rights abuses. I'm angry about all of the excessive use of force. I'm angry about, what happened on October 7th in Israel and what happened in Gaza. I'm angry about what Russia's doing in Ukraine. I'm angry about Sudan. I'm angry about the Eastern Congo. I mean, I think we should be all looking at the tragedies and the conflicts that are bringing about so much suffering and be dealing with them. That's why the national security strategy is not to my liking, because I think the United States has an important role in trying to resolve these conflicts and alleviate the suffering and give people a chance to have peaceful, prosperous lives. That should be our goal. That is in America's interest. I don't care where in the world you are. So, of course, the suffering in Gaza is horrific. Full stop. Suffering everywhere is horrific. So let's look at what we can do to try to resolve, what is being done to people in so many different settings right now. And I think that the emphasis on one terrible conflict sort of doesn't do justice to the challenges that we are confronting. And I don't want to see my country basically say, you know what, those other presidents, they tried to resolve conflicts. They tried to stand for democracy and freedom. They stood up for human rights. What a waste of time. That is, to me, an abdication of leadership. And I want to see us involved everywhere, trying to stop the kind of horrible abuses that are going on.
I'm with you on all of that. I think the argument we often hear, of course, is that America has a different role in the Middle East. Of course, it supports Israel and therefore is complicit to a degree. But I want to draw a line from all of this to 9/11 and America's misadventures after 9/11 and the war in Iraq, the war on terror. And one could make the case that at some level, America's been unable to maybe curb Israel in this particular case, or even impose its will and talk about values and rules and norms and conflicts around the world, in part because it too has skirted rules and norms in several instances in its history. Is it your sense now that we're entering a world where the rules and norms don't matter as much? And what can the United States do?
Look, I think it's an interesting analogy, because when a country is attacked, and as you know, I was a senator from New York on 9/11, so I was deeply involved in dealing with families who had lost loved ones, dealing with the people who had been grievously injured, dealing with the horrible cleanup and everything we had to do in Lower Manhattan. That is a traumatic event. And people don't always make the best decisions post-traumatic events. You have to understand that. And I'm not sure that, that was well understood after 9/11 in American decision-making. And I think you can see other examples of that, obviously. That's part of the reason why we established all of these norms and laws after the Second World War. When you talk about how the rule of law, how the expectations of militaries in combat are supposed to be judged, all of that was an effort to try to construct a system that could rein in bad leaders like Vladimir Putin, who wants to dominate and destroy his neighbors, leaders who are traumatized by horrific events and therefore lash out and may not be, restrained and acting the way that they should. That's part of why we constructed this whole system, to move away from norms and laws in the international system will only benefit the worst actors in the international system.